Aston makes huge changes as Stroll reveals why he chose Newey as team principal. Ferrari and Hamilton are reaching a breaking point, and all the latest F1 news. The Formula One world just witnessed one of the most shocking management shakeups in recent history. And if you think you know what happened at Aston Martin, think again. What I'm about to reveal will completely change how you understand the politics and power plays happening behind the scenes in Formula One right now. Picture this. You're Adrian Newey, arguably the greatest car designer in Formula One history. You've just left Red Bull Racing after decades of dominance, looking for a new challenge. You sign with Aston Martin as their technical guru, expecting to focus on what you do best, designing championship-winning cars. But then something nobody saw coming happens. The team owner walks into your office and offers you something that could either be the ultimate dream job or a complete nightmare. Lawrence Stroll just made Newey the new team principal of Aston Martin, effective from the 2026 season. But here's where this story gets absolutely wild and why this decision might be either pure genius or complete madness. Let me paint you the full picture of what's really happening here. Andy Cowell, the mastermind behind Mercedes' hybrid engine dominance, had been running Aston Martin as team boss and CEO. This guy literally engineered the power units that helped Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes dominate Formula One for years. He was supposed to be the man to lead Aston Martin to championship glory. So why is he suddenly being moved to a strategic role while Newey takes the reins? The official story sounds reasonable enough. Stroll claims this restructuring will allow both men to play to their collective strengths. Cowell will focus on strategic partnerships, working closely with Honda as Aston Martin's new engine supplier, while Newey gets to unleash his creative and technical expertise as team principal. But if you read between the lines, there's so much more to the story. Think about what we know about Adrian Newey. This is a man who thinks in aerodynamic flows and suspension geometries. He's famous for designing cars with a pencil and paper while others use sophisticated computer programs. His brain works differently than almost anyone else in Formula One. He sees solutions that others miss entirely. But being a team principal? That's about managing people, dealing with media pressure, handling driver conflicts, and navigating the political minefield that is modern Formula One. The timing of this announcement is absolutely crucial. We're less than 2 years away from Formula One's biggest regulation changes in decades. The 2026 rules will completely revolutionize how these cars work, from the chassis to the power units. Everything teams know about building fast Formula One cars is about to change dramatically. And Aston Martin is betting everything on Newey being the person who can navigate this transition while also running an entire Formula One operation. Here's what makes this decision either brilliant or terrifying. Newey has already been working on Aston Martin's 2026 car design since he joined the team earlier this year. He's been deep in the technical regulations, understanding how these new rules will reshape competitive advantage. If anyone can find the loopholes and innovations that will make the difference in 2026, it's him. But now he'll also be responsible for driver management, race strategy decisions, personnel issues, and all the political aspects of running a Formula One team. Consider what this means for the current dynamics at Aston Martin. Fernando Alonso, one of the most demanding and politically savvy drivers in Formula One history, will now be reporting to Newey instead of Cowell. Lance Stroll, the owner's son, and the other driver, will also be under Newey's direct leadership. The engineering teams, the mechanics, the strategists, everyone will now answer to a man whose expertise lies in creating fast cars, not necessarily in managing complex human dynamics. But here's where Stroll's gamble might actually pay off in ways nobody expects. Traditional team principals often come from racing backgrounds or business management. They understand the operational side, but might not have the deep technical insight that drives competitive advantage. Newey brings something completely different to the role. When he's making strategic decisions during races, he'll be thinking about how those choices affect the car's performance in ways that others might miss. The relationship with Honda adds another fascinating layer to the story. Cowell's transition to Chief Strategy Officer isn't random. It's specifically designed to leverage his engine expertise as Aston Martin switches from Mercedes power units to Honda. Meanwhile, Newey will be responsible for ensuring the chassis design maximizes whatever Honda delivers. This division of responsibilities could create unprecedented synergy between engine and chassis development. Looking at the competitive landscape makes this move even more intriguing. Red Bull is struggling to maintain their dominance without Newey. McLaren and Ferrari are fighting for championships. Mercedes is trying to rebuild. Into this chaos steps Aston Martin with perhaps the most unconventional leadership structure in Formula One. They're essentially betting that technical brilliance at the top will trump traditional management approaches. The 2026 regulation changes create a unique window of opportunity. When fundamental rules change this dramatically, past performance becomes less predictive of future success. Teams that were dominant can suddenly struggle, while others find breakthrough performance. Aston Martin is positioning itself to be the team that finds those breakthroughs, with Newey leading both the technical development and the overall team strategy. But let's talk about the risks here. Team principal responsibilities extend far beyond car design. When drivers are complaining about strategy calls during races, Newey will need to handle that pressure. When the media wants explanations for poor performance, he'll be facing those questions. When internal conflicts arise between departments, he'll need to resolve them. These are skills that have nothing to do with aerodynamic genius. The financial implications are staggering too. Aston Martin has been investing heavily in facilities, personnel, and technology. Lawrence Stroll has committed hundreds of millions of dollars to this Formula One project. Now he's placing the leadership of that entire investment in the hands of someone who's never run a Formula One team before. The pressure on Newey will be immense. What makes this situation even more complex is the timing within Newey's career. He's not a young engineer looking to expand his skills. He's an established legend who could easily have continued designing cars for the rest of his career. Taking on team principal responsibilities represents a fundamental shift in how he'll spend his time and energy. Instead of focusing purely on technical problems, he'll be dealing with commercial pressures, regulatory compliance, and human resource management. The success of this gamble will ultimately depend on how well Aston Martin structures the support around Newey. If they can handle the administrative and operational aspects of running the team while allowing him to focus on the technical and strategic decisions that directly impact performance, this could be revolutionary. But if he gets bogged down in the day-to-day management challenges that consume most team principals, it could waste his unique talents. As we head toward 2026, every Formula One team is making critical decisions about how to approach the new regulations. Some are investing in simulation technology. Others are focusing on driver development or operational efficiency. Aston Martin has chosen to bet everything on having the right technical mind, making the key decisions at every level of the organization. The Formula One world will be watching this experiment very closely. If Newey succeeds as team principal while also delivering a championship contending car for 2026, it could fundamentally change how teams think about leadership structures. But if the experiment fails, it will serve as a cautionary tale about placing technical expertise above management experience in such a complex and high-pressure environment. Picture this. You're watching what should be a straightforward Formula One race finish in Las Vegas. Max Verstappen takes the checkered flag. McLaren drivers Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri celebrate solid finishes in 2nd and 5th place. The championship battle looks set for an epic finale. Then boom, both McLaren cars get disqualified hours later. And if you think that's dramatic enough, wait until you see how Red Bull decided to twist the knife. What happened in Vegas didn't stay in Vegas. It became the latest chapter in one of Formula One's most entertaining rivalries. complete with social media trolling that had over 100,000 people hitting the like button. Today we're diving deep into the McLaren disqualification saga, Red Bull's absolutely savage response, and what this all means for a championship fight that just got turned completely upside down. Let's start with what actually went down at the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Max Verstappen dominated the weekend, securing his 6th victory of the season and proving once again why he's the reigning 4-time world champion. But the real story emerged hours after the race ended, when both McLaren drivers found themselves kicked out of the results entirely. The culprit was excessive skid block wear. Now, if you're not familiar with the technical side of modern Formula One, let me break this down for you. These current generation cars run incredibly close to the ground to maximize aerodynamic efficiency. There's a wooden plank underneath each car that's designed to prevent teams from running too low and gaining an unfair advantage. When that plank wears down beyond legal limits, you're out. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella later explained that both cars experienced unexpected high levels of porpoising during the race. That's when the car bounces violently up and down, causing excessive contact with the track surface. According to Stella, this wasn't something they'd seen during practice sessions, and both cars had sustained what he called accidental damage that increased floor movement. The FIA investigation concluded that while the breach was unintentional and there was no deliberate attempt to circumvent regulations, the technical infringement still stood. Rules are rules in Formula One, and both Norris and Piastri were stripped of their points. But here's where the story gets really juicy. The championship implications are absolutely massive. Before the disqualifications, Norris was comfortably ahead in the title fight. Now suddenly, Oscar Piastri and Max Verstappen are dead level on points at 366 each, with Norris maintaining just a 24-point advantage heading into the final 2 races in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. Think about that for a second. We went from what looked like a relatively comfortable championship lead to a 3-way battle where any one of these drivers could realistically take the title. The mathematics completely changed overnight. Now, if you've been following Formula One for any length of time, you'll know that Red Bull and McLaren have developed quite the bitter rivalry over recent years. McLaren CEO Zak Brown and former Red Bull team principal Christian Horner famously don't see eye to eye. There's been tension, there's been drama, and there's been what some might call professional pettiness. The latest flashpoint came at the United States Grand Prix with something that became known as Tapegate. Red Bull was fined €50,000 after a team member re-entered the grid area after the formation lap had started. It emerged that this unnamed employee had tried to interfere with a strip of tape McLaren had left on the pit wall as a visual reference point for Norris on the grid. Childish, perhaps? Entertaining? Absolutely. So when McLaren got disqualified in Las Vegas, Red Bull saw an opportunity they simply couldn't pass up. Their sim racing team posted a video on social media that became an instant viral sensation. The clip, titled "How Not to Get a DQ," showed footage of the car setup screen from the official Formula One video game, with both front and rear ride heights cranked up to maximum levels. The accompanying caption was pure gold. Just a bit of friendly advice. The quotation marks around friendly advice told you everything you need to know about Red Bull's true intentions. This wasn't friendly at all. This was calculated, savage trolling at its finest. The video exploded on social media, gathering over 100,000 likes on Instagram alone. Even the official EA Sports Formula One game account couldn't resist getting involved, commenting that they didn't endorse this savagery but admitted it was funny. When the game developers are acknowledging your burn, you know you've hit the mark. But Red Bull wasn't done there. Former Red Bull mechanic turned team ambassador Callum Nicholas added fuel to the fire with his own social media post. He wrote that he'd held back so many jokes throughout the day because he was making a concerted effort to be a grown-up professional. Then added, "It's fine, but not as much fun." The restraint in that message somehow made it even more cutting. Nicholas was essentially saying he could have gone much harder on McLaren, but was choosing to take the high road. It's the kind of psychological warfare that makes Formula One rivalries so compelling to watch. What makes this whole situation even more fascinating is the timing. We're at the business end of the championship season. Every point matters. Every psychological advantage counts. Red Bull didn't just see McLaren's misfortune as an opportunity to gain points in the standings. They saw it as a chance to get inside their rivals' heads. Think about the pressure McLaren is under right now. They had what should have been a solid weekend, then lost it all due to a technical infringement they claim was accidental. Their drivers are frustrated. Their team is scrambling to understand what went wrong. And now their biggest rival is publicly mocking them on social media for the entire Formula One world to see. That's the kind of mental pressure that can affect performance in the crucial final races. Red Bull knows this. They've been in championship battles before. They understand that sometimes the psychological game is just as important as what happens on track. The technical aspect of this story is equally fascinating. McLaren's explanation that both cars experienced unexpected porpoising raises some interesting questions. How do you not notice during practice sessions that your car setup might cause excessive plank wear during a full race distance? This is Formula One, where teams spend millions analyzing every possible scenario. Some observers have suggested that McLaren might have been pushing the limits of their setup to extract maximum performance, knowing they were in a tight championship battle. If that's true, then the disqualification becomes less about bad luck and more about calculated risk-taking that didn't pay off. The fact that both cars suffered the same issue simultaneously is particularly suspicious. If this was truly accidental damage causing increased floor movement, you'd expect it to affect the cars differently. The identical outcome suggests this might have been more systematic than McLaren wants to admit. But regardless of the cause, the consequences are crystal clear. McLaren lost crucial points at a critical moment in the season. Red Bull gained a psychological advantage, and the championship fight became infinitely more interesting. Looking ahead to Qatar and Abu Dhabi, the dynamics have completely shifted. Verstappen now knows he can win the championship by simply staying ahead of both McLaren drivers in the remaining races. Piastri finds himself in the unusual position of being level on points with the defending champion. And Norris, despite maintaining his points lead, must be feeling the pressure more than ever. Red Bull's social media trolling serves multiple purposes beyond simple entertainment. It demonstrates confidence, suggests they're not intimidated by McLaren's pace, and potentially plants seeds of doubt in their rivals' minds. When you're this close to a championship, every psychological edge matters. The Formula One community's reaction has been mixed but largely entertained. Fans love seeing this kind of rivalry play out in public. It adds personality to what can sometimes feel like an overly corporate sport. The fact that even EA Sports got involved shows how this story transcended typical racing coverage and became genuine viral content. As we head into the final two races, this McLaren disqualification and Red Bull's response will be remembered as a pivotal moment in the championship battle. Whether it proves to be the turning point that swung the title toward Red Bull remains to be seen. But one thing's certain: the psychological warfare is just getting started, and Red Bull just landed the first major blow of this final phase. The Las Vegas Grand Prix will go down in history not just for Verstappen's victory, but for how a technical infringement became the catalyst for one of the most savage pieces of social media trolling in Formula One history. The Ferrari dream is turning into a nightmare, and now one of Formula One's most respected voices has finally spoken out. Ross Brawn, The mastermind behind some of the sport's greatest triumphs has broken his silence on Lewis Hamilton's shocking struggles at Ferrari. What he reveals about Hamilton's future will completely change how you see this disaster unfolding at Maranello. Picture this: the 7-time world champion, arguably the greatest driver of his generation, qualifying dead last at Las Vegas. Not because of a mechanical failure, not because of a penalty, but simply because the car wasn't fast enough. This is the same Lewis Hamilton who dominated Formula One for years, reduced to fighting for scraps at the back of the grid. It's almost unthinkable, yet here we are. But before we dive into Braun's explosive comments, let's understand just how catastrophic Hamilton's first season at Ferrari has become. The move to Maranello was supposed to be the fairy tale ending to an incredible career. Hamilton joining the sport's most iconic team, chasing that elusive 8th world championship. Instead, it's been a masterclass in disappointment. The statistics tell a brutal story. Hamilton hasn't even managed a single podium finish with Ferrari. Let that sink in for a moment. A driver who won 6 championships in 7 years at Mercedes can't even crack the top 3 with his new team. The Las Vegas Grand Prix qualifying session will go down in history for all the wrong reasons. Hamilton became the first Ferrari driver to qualify last on pure pace since 2009. That's 15 years of Ferrari drivers, and none of them had suffered such humiliation until now. What makes the situation even more painful is the context. Ferrari isn't some backmarker team struggling for relevance. This is the most successful team in Formula One history, with more championship titles than any other constructor. Yet somehow, they've managed to create a car that's turned one of the sport's greatest talents into a mobile chicane. The warning signs were there even before Las Vegas. Ferrari Chairman John Elkann had already publicly criticized both Hamilton and his teammate Charles Leclerc, telling them to talk less following their disappointing performance in Brazil. Imagine the humiliation of being told by your own boss to essentially shut up and perform better. For a driver of Hamilton's caliber, this must have been particularly stinging. Now enter Ross Brawn, a man whose opinion carries enormous weight in the paddock. Brawn isn't just any former team principal or technical director. He's the architect behind some of Formula One's most dominant periods. He masterminded Michael Schumacher's incredible run at Ferrari, overseeing 5 consecutive drivers' championships and 6 constructors' titles. When Ferrari was at its absolute peak, Ross Brawn was pulling the strings behind the scenes. But here's where the story gets really interesting. After leaving Ferrari, Brawn went on to Mercedes, where he made one of the most significant decisions in modern Formula One history. He signed Lewis Hamilton as Michael Schumacher's replacement at the end of 2012. This wasn't just a driver signing, it was the foundation stone for Mercedes' upcoming domination. Under the framework Brawn established, Hamilton would go on to win 6 championships in 7 years. So when Ross Brawn speaks about Lewis Hamilton, people listen. He knows both drivers and he knows both teams. His perspective is uniquely informed by success at the highest level. That's what makes his recent comments so significant and frankly so revealing about what's really happening at Ferrari. Brawn's assessment of Hamilton's current situation is surprisingly optimistic, but with a crucial caveat that should worry every Ferrari fan. He believes Hamilton has the mental strength and determination to bounce back from this disastrous start. After all, Hamilton has shown resilience throughout his career, overcoming various challenges and setbacks. But Brawn's confidence comes with a massive asterisk. Everything depends on Ferrari getting the 2026 regulations right. This is where the plot thickens dramatically. Formula One is undergoing its biggest regulatory overhaul in years for 2026. The chassis and engine regulations are being completely rewritten simultaneously. The sport is embracing 50% electrification, fully sustainable fuels, and active aerodynamics. These aren't minor tweaks. This is a complete revolution in how Formula One cars are designed and built. What Braun knows, and what Ferrari fans should be terrified about, is that some teams are already ahead in preparing for these new regulations. Rumors in the paddock suggest that Mercedes, Hamilton's former team, has a significant advantage in their 2026 preparations. The Brackley-based outfit has been working on the new regulations for months, possibly years, and their head start could be decisive. Meanwhile, Ferrari appears to be playing catch-up. Details about their 2026 car, codenamed Project 678, have been leaking out, suggesting they're scrambling to develop new solutions. Reports indicate they're switching to a push-rod suspension system, both front and rear, for next season. They're also supposedly working on a revolutionary new intake system for their 2026 engine. But revolutionary doesn't always mean successful, especially when you're chasing rather than leading development. The timing couldn't be worse for Hamilton. At 40 years old, he doesn't have the luxury of waiting for Ferrari to eventually get things right. If Ferrari stumbles with the 2026 regulations, Hamilton could find himself stuck in another uncompetitive car for the remaining years of his career. The window for that 8th championship is rapidly closing, and every season that passes without a competitive Ferrari is another missed opportunity. What's particularly concerning is Hamilton's own state of mind. His comments after Las Vegas were remarkably bleak for someone who's usually maintained a positive public facade throughout his career difficulties. He openly admitted he wasn't looking forward to next season, describing his current situation as having nothing positive to take from it. When asked to clarify, he made it clear he was referring to the entire 2026 season, not just the next race. This level of public despair from Hamilton is almost unprecedented. Even during his difficult seasons at McLaren or his early struggles at Mercedes, he rarely expressed such hopelessness. It suggests the situation at Ferrari might be worse than the public realizes. Perhaps the car's problems run deeper than anyone wants to admit. Or maybe Hamilton has inside information about Ferrari's 2026 prospects that aren't encouraging. Ross Brawn's careful optimism suddenly makes more sense in this context. He's not just expressing confidence in Hamilton's character. He's highlighting that Hamilton's Ferrari career will succeed or fail based on factors largely outside the driver's control. If Ferrari nails the 2026 regulations, Hamilton could still achieve his dreams. If they don't, his move to Maranello will be remembered as one of Formula One's most disappointing career decisions. The pressure on Ferrari's technical team must be enormous. They're not just developing a car for 2026. They're developing Lewis Hamilton's last realistic chance at an 8th World Championship. They're carrying the hopes of the sport's most passionate fan base and trying to restore the reputation of Formula One's most storied team. The stakes couldn't be higher. What makes this situation even more dramatic is that Hamilton's former team might be the one to deny him success once again. If Mercedes has indeed cracked the 2026 regulations first, they could dominate the new era while Hamilton watches from the midfield. The irony would be devastating. Hamilton leaves Mercedes seeking championship glory elsewhere, only to watch his old team win titles with someone else driving. Ross Brawn's ultimate message is both hopeful and ominous. Hamilton has the talent and determination to succeed, but success isn't guaranteed. Everything hinges on Ferrari's execution of the biggest regulatory change in Formula One's recent history. It's a gamble with incredibly high stakes, and the clock is ticking. Will Ferrari rise to the challenge and give Hamilton the car he deserves? Or will this Ferrari dream become a cautionary tale about the unpredictability of Formula One? The 2026 season can't come soon enough because both Hamilton's legacy and Ferrari's future are hanging in the balance. Picture this. You're watching one of the most dramatic Formula One races of the season, and suddenly your favorite driver gets slapped with a penalty that makes absolutely no sense. That's exactly what happened to Mercedes' rising star, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, at the Las Vegas Grand Prix. And the fallout has exposed something fascinating about how modern F1 really works behind the scenes. What I'm about to show you reveals not just the controversy itself, but the incredible detective work that followed and why this story matters for every single F1 fan watching today. By the end of this video, you'll understand the technology battle happening between teams and officials, the politics of penalties, and most importantly, how this young driver's response to adversity might just define his entire career. Let me start with what actually happened in Vegas. Antonelli had just delivered one of the most impressive rookie performances we've seen in years. Starting from 17th on the grid, he carved his way through the field with the kind of surgical precision that reminded everyone why Mercedes signed him in the first place. The kid was absolutely flying, managing his tires like a veteran, making passes that left commentators speechless. Then came the race start, and this is where things get interesting. The stewards decided that Antonelli had made what they called a false start. Now, if you've been watching F1 for any length of time, you know false starts are serious business. They're designed to prevent drivers from gaining an unfair advantage by moving before the lights go out. The penalty? 5 seconds added to his race time, which in F1 terms might as well be a lifetime. But here's where this story takes a turn that nobody expected. Peter Bonington, Antonelli's race engineer and one of the most respected voices in the paddock, came on the radio with words that sent shockwaves through the F1 community. He called the penalty complete nonsense, and when someone with Bonington's reputation speaks out like that, people listen. The television replays showed what appeared to be only the tiniest movement from Antonelli's car. We're talking millimeters here, barely perceptible to the naked eye. Yet the stewards were adamant that their sensors had detected movement significant enough to warrant a penalty. This created a perfect storm of controversy because what the human eye could see and what the technology was reporting seemed to be telling completely different stories. Now this is where Toto Wolff enters the picture, and his response reveals something fascinating about how top F1 teams operate. Instead of just accepting the penalty and moving on, Mercedes launched their own internal investigation. Think about that for a moment. This team has access to some of the most sophisticated telemetry and data analysis systems in the world, and they were about to use all of it to either vindicate or condemn their own driver. The investigation focused on two critical areas: clutch operation and brake application. In F1, a false start typically occurs when a driver either releases the clutch or comes off the brake pedal prematurely. These actions would show up clearly in the car's data systems, creating an undeniable digital fingerprint of any irregular behavior. What Mercedes discovered was remarkable. Their analysis found absolutely no evidence of Antonelli doing anything wrong. No clutch release, no brake pedal movement. Nothing that would indicate he had attempted to gain an unfair advantage at the start. The data was clean, which meant that if there was movement, it wasn't caused by driver input. This revelation opens up a whole new dimension to the story. If Antonelli didn't release the clutch or lift off the brakes, what caused the movement that the FIA sensors detected? There are several possibilities, each more intriguing than the last. Perhaps it was tire pressure changes, suspension settling, or even the natural movement that occurs when 20 high-performance racing cars are sitting on a grid with engines running at incredible temperatures. Wolff's handling of this situation demonstrates the delicate balance team principals must maintain. On one hand, he publicly accepted the stewards' decision, acknowledging that they have access to sensor data that might reveal things not visible to the human eye. This shows respect for the officiating system and maintains diplomatic relations with the governing body. But on the other hand, he made sure to share Mercedes' findings publicly. This wasn't just about defending his driver, it was about transparency and showing that the team takes these matters seriously enough to conduct thorough investigations. When Wolff stated that they found nothing irregular with the clutch or brake operation, he was essentially laying down a marker for future incidents. The steward's own report adds another layer to this mystery. They acknowledged that the movement was slight, which seems to validate what everyone could see on television. Yet they maintained that consistency in penalty application required the 5-second sanction. This raises important questions about the balance between technological precision and practical racing reality. What makes this controversy even more compelling is how it affected the race outcome. Initially, the penalty dropped Antonelli from 4th to 5th place, which would have been devastating for a rookie making such an impressive debut. But then Formula One served up one of its trademark plot twists. Both McLaren drivers were disqualified for technical violations related to excessive skid block wear, suddenly promoting Antonelli back into the podium positions. This sequence of events created a narrative that screenwriters would reject as too coincidental. A rookie driver, penalized for a questionable false start, ends up on the podium anyway due to his rival's misfortune. It's the kind of story that reminds us why F1 remains the most unpredictable sport in the world. The implications of Mercedes' investigation extend far beyond this single incident. It demonstrates the growing sophistication of team data analysis and raises questions about the relationship between team telemetry and official FIA sensors. If teams can conclusively prove that their drivers didn't commit the actions that typically constitute rule violations, how should the sport handle cases where official sensors suggest otherwise? This also highlights the evolution of F1 technology and officiating. Modern sensors can detect movements measured in fractions of millimeters and milliseconds, but this precision creates new challenges. At what point does technological capability exceed practical necessity? When movement is so slight that it provides no competitive advantage, should it still be penalized? For Antonelli personally, this incident and its aftermath might prove to be a defining moment in his career. His mature response to the penalty, combined with his impressive recovery drive, showed exactly the kind of character that top teams look for in their drivers. The fact that his own team conducted such a thorough investigation and publicly supported his innocence sends a powerful message about their confidence in him. The broader F1 community's reaction to this controversy also reveals something important about the sport's current state. Fans, commentators, and even rival teams seemed genuinely surprised by the penalty, suggesting that the movement captured by the FIA censors was indeed marginal. This collective skepticism indicates that the racing community has developed sophisticated expectations about what constitutes fair officiating. Looking forward, this incident could influence how similar situations are handled in the future. Mercedes' decision to publicly share their investigation findings sets a precedent for transparency that other teams might follow. It also puts additional pressure on the FIA to ensure their censor systems and penalty applications are both accurate and proportionate. The controversy also raises interesting questions about the role of race engineers like Peter Bonington. His outspoken criticism of the penalty decision reflects the passionate advocacy that engineers feel for their drivers, but it also demonstrates how the human element remains crucial in a sport increasingly dominated by technology and data. What this entire episode ultimately reveals is that modern Formula One exists at the intersection of cutting-edge technology, human judgment, and sporting drama. The fact that Mercedes could conduct such a comprehensive investigation within hours of the race shows how sophisticated team operations have become. Yet the controversy itself proves that technology alone cannot resolve all questions of fairness and sporting integrity. For fans watching at home, this story offers a fascinating glimpse into the unseen world of F1 officiating and team operations. It reminds us that every penalty decision involves complex interactions between multiple data sources, human interpretation, and established precedents. The sport we love continues to evolve, driven by technological advancement but still fundamentally dependent on human judgment and character. As we look ahead to future races, this controversy will likely influence how teams and officials approach similar situations, potentially leading to more transparent processes and better communication between all parties involved in these critical decisions. What's happening, Formula One fans? We're just 2 races away from crowning a 2025 world champion, and things just got absolutely wild in Las Vegas. If you thought this title fight couldn't get any crazier, think again, because Oscar Piastri's championship dreams might be crumbling faster than a house of cards. And Jos Verstappen just dropped a bombshell observation that has everyone talking. Right now, we've got 3 drivers mathematically in the hunt for the championship. Lando Norris leads the pack. Oscar Piastri sits 24 points behind him. And here's where it gets interesting. Max Verstappen has clawed his way back to tie Piastri on points after that stunning Las Vegas victory. But here's the kicker that's got the F1 paddock buzzing. Jos Verstappen claims he can see clear differences between how the 2 McLaren cars are behaving on track. And if he's right, this could explain everything about Piastri's sudden collapse. Let me paint you the picture of just how dramatically things have shifted for Oscar Piastri. After the Dutch Grand Prix, this guy was sitting pretty with a 34-point championship lead over his teammate Norris. He looked unstoppable, like he was cruising toward his maiden world title. Fast forward to today, and Piastri hasn't seen a podium in 6 consecutive races. 6 races without a podium when you're fighting for a championship is basically Formula One suicide. And it's turned what should have been a coronation into a potential disaster. The Las Vegas Grand Prix was supposed to be damage limitation for Piastri, but instead, it became a nightmare wrapped in a small silver lining. Both McLaren drivers got disqualified due to excessive plank wear. That's the technical regulation about the floor of the car wearing down too much during the race. Now here's the twisted irony. This disqualification actually helped Piastri compared to what could have happened. When they crossed the finish line, Norris was 2nd and Piastri was 4th, which would have expanded the gap between them to 30 points. The disqualification kept it at 24 points, but here's the gut punch. Verstappen's victory combined with McLaren's 0 points means Max is now tied with Piastri in the championship standings. Think about that for a second. Piastri went from leading by 34 points to potentially finishing 3rd in the championship. That's not just disappointing. That's career-defining, devastating. For a driver who dominated junior categories and was considered mentally unbreakable, this collapse is sending shockwaves through the Formula One world. But here's where Jos Verstappen's comments become absolutely fascinating and potentially explosive. Jos isn't just some random observer. He's Max's father, yes, but he's also a former Formula One driver who knows what to look for when watching cars on track. And according to Jos, the 2 McLaren cars are not behaving identically, which raises some serious questions about what's really going on behind the scenes at McLaren. Speaking to Dutch media, Jos said he can see a clear difference between how the 2 McLarens handle corners. One car slides, the other doesn't. Now, in Formula One, even tiny differences in car behavior can translate to massive performance gaps. We're talking about a sport where hundredths of seconds matter, where the difference between winning and losing can come down to microscopic details in car setup, aerodynamics, or mechanical grip. This observation from Jos feeds into conspiracy theories that have been swirling around Piastri's sudden drop in form. When a driver who was dominating suddenly can't find pace for 6 straight races, people start asking questions. Is it the car? Is it the setup? Is there favoritism within the team? McLaren has bent over backwards to appear fair between their drivers, sometimes making strategic decisions that seemed to hurt their own interests just to maintain that appearance of equality. But what if the cars genuinely aren't equal? What if there are subtle differences in how they're set up, or how different components are performing? In Formula One, teams often run different setups on their cars to gather data, or because drivers have different preferences. Sometimes these differences can snowball into significant performance gaps. especially when you're dealing with regulations as tight as modern Formula One. The pressure is mounting on everyone involved. Jos pointed out that McLaren is feeling the heat now, and you can understand why. They've gone from having both drivers in championship contention to potentially seeing their lead driver lose out to Verstappen, who many had written off earlier in the season. The mathematics are still brutal for everyone involved. If Max wins both remaining races and Norris finishes second both times, Norris becomes world champion. But that's a huge if in a sport where anything can happen. For Piastri, the situation has become desperate. He needs to not just beat his teammate, he needs to dominate the final 2 races while hoping Norris has problems. That's a tall order for any driver, but especially for one who's been struggling to find pace for over a month. The psychological pressure must be immense. Imagine going from championship favorite to potentially finishing third, all while questions swirl about whether your car is even capable of the performance you need. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella tried to keep things diplomatic after Las Vegas, telling media that mathematics is what counts and that Piastri needs to go into the final races with the will to win. But you have to wonder what's really being said behind closed doors. Are they prioritizing Norris now? Are they making strategic decisions based on who has the better championship position? The timing of these car behavior differences that Jos observed is particularly intriguing. Did they start around the time Piastri's form began to decline? Are they the result of different development paths, different setups, or something more fundamental? In Formula One, even small changes to aerodynamics or suspension can have massive impacts on how a car performs, especially when you're dealing with tracks that have different characteristics. What makes this even more compelling is that Max Verstappen now has nothing to lose. As Jos pointed out, Max can go all-out attack mode for these final 2 races. When you're tied for second in the championship but still mathematically in the hunt, you can take risks that the points leader might not be comfortable with. Max has proven throughout his career that he's at his most dangerous when his back is against the wall. The broader implications here extend beyond just this championship fight. If there really are consistent differences between the McLaren cars, it raises questions about Formula One's technical regulations and how teams manage their driver pairings. It also highlights just how fine the margins are in modern Formula One, where tiny differences can separate championship glory from heartbreak. Looking ahead to Qatar and Abu Dhabi, every technical decision McLaren makes will be scrutinized. Every setup choice, every strategy call, every pit stop will be analyzed for signs of favoritism or inequality. The pressure on Piastri to perform is enormous, but so is the pressure on McLaren to prove their commitment to both drivers remains equal. For Formula One fans, this controversy adds another layer of intrigue to what's already shaping up as one of the most dramatic championship conclusions in recent memory. We've got 3 drivers mathematically in the hunt, technical controversies, family drama with the Verstappens making bold claims, and a young driver watching his championship dreams potentially slip away in real time. The next 2 weeks will determine not just who becomes world champion, but potentially reshape how we view this entire season and the relationships within McLaren. Will Piastri find the pace to mount a miraculous comeback? Will the car differences that Jos observed prove decisive? Or will this controversy become just another footnote in what's already been an unforgettable season? One thing's for certain. With accusations flying and championships on the line, these final 2 races are going to be absolutely unmissable. What if I told you that one of the most promising Formula One careers came to a crushing halt, leaving a driver with one of the most famous names in motorsport scrambling for a second chance? Today we're diving deep into Mick Schumacher's shocking revelation about his failed negotiations with Cadillac F1 and the surprising career pivot that nobody saw coming. The son of 7-time world champion Michael Schumacher just dropped a bombshell about how close he actually came to landing a seat with the incoming American team, and trust me, The details will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about modern F1 politics. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of what went wrong, let's set the stage. We're talking about a driver who carried the weight of the greatest surname in Formula One history, who showed flashes of brilliance during his time at Haas, but ultimately found himself without a seat at the end of 2022. For nearly 3 years, Mick has been the subject of endless speculation, linked to almost every team on the grid at some point, yet consistently coming up empty-handed. Now, with Cadillac preparing to enter Formula One as the 11th team in 2026, many thought this would finally be Mick's golden ticket back to the pinnacle of motorsport. The timing seemed perfect, the opportunity was there, and frankly, who wouldn't want a Schumacher back on the F1 grid? Here's where things get absolutely fascinating. In a recent interview, Mick revealed just how advanced his discussions with Cadillac actually became. And when I say advanced, I mean he was literally in contention right up until the final decision was made. This wasn't some preliminary chat or exploratory conversation. This was the real deal, with serious negotiations happening behind closed doors. Think about that for a moment. We're talking about a team that could have made headlines worldwide by signing the son of the greatest driver in F1 history. The marketing potential alone would have been astronomical, yet somehow, some way, it all fell apart. Mick's own words paint a picture of frustration mixed with understanding. He acknowledged that the situation was tough, but he also seemed to genuinely comprehend why Cadillac ultimately decided to go in what he diplomatically called a different direction. But what was that different direction exactly? Well, Cadillac shocked everyone by announcing their driver lineup of Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez. Now, on paper, this makes complete sense from a pure experience standpoint. Between these two drivers, you're looking at 16 Grand Prix victories, with Bottas contributing 10 wins and Perez adding 6. That's serious pedigree and proven race-winning capability. But here's what makes this decision so intriguing from a strategic perspective. Cadillac is entering F1 during one of the most significant regulation changes in recent memory. The 2026 season will introduce completely new chassis and engine regulations. Cars will be smaller, 30 kilograms lighter, and feature active aerodynamics on both wings while retiring the current DRS system. The electrical energy output will triple, and engines will run on fully sustainable biofuel. In this environment of massive change, you could argue for either approach. Option 1 is exactly what Cadillac chose. Experienced drivers who understand F1 machinery and can provide stable feedback during a tumultuous period. Option 2 would have been to invest in younger talent who might be more adaptable to revolutionary new regulations. Mick represented that second option, and his exclusion raises some serious questions about what teams really value when making these crucial decisions. Is it pure experience, marketability, financial considerations, or something else entirely? What's particularly revealing is how Mick processed this rejection. Rather than dwelling on disappointment, he asked himself a fundamental question that every racing driver must eventually confront. Do I want to keep chasing an F1 return at all costs, or do I want to actually race and enjoy competitive single-seater racing? This internal dialogue led him to a decision that many didn't see coming. Instead of continuing to wait on the sidelines hoping for an F1 opportunity, Mick signed with Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing to contest the full 2026 IndyCar season. This isn't just any IndyCar team either. RLL has serious credentials and will pair him with Graham Rahal and Lewis Foster. Now, here's where this story takes an even more interesting turn. When asked directly whether his IndyCar move represented the end of his F1 aspirations, Mick's response was definitively negative. He emphasized that both series involve single-seater racing and pointed out that numerous great drivers have made successful transitions between IndyCar and F1, often maintaining affiliations with multiple teams. This perspective is actually quite shrewd when you think about it. The traditional path from IndyCar back to F1 isn't well traveled, but it's not non-existent either. What's more important is that Mick will be actively racing competitive machinery, staying sharp, and potentially proving himself in a different but equally demanding environment. Consider the alternative scenario where he might have spent another year or two on the sidelines, serving as a reserve driver or competing in sports cars while hoping for an F1 opportunity that might never materialize. By choosing IndyCar, he's taking control of his own destiny rather than remaining dependent on F1 team politics and preferences. There's also an interesting psychological element to this decision. Mick mentioned feeling super glad and happy about where he ended up, which suggests he's found peace with stepping away from the relentless pressure of trying to live up to his father's legacy in Formula One. Sometimes the best career moves are the ones that prioritize personal fulfillment and competitive satisfaction over external expectations. But let's not forget the broader implications of this story. Mick's experience with Cadillac offers a fascinating glimpse into how new F1 teams approach driver selection. Despite having the opportunity to generate massive publicity by signing a Schumacher, they opted for the safer, more experienced route. This tells us something important about how seriously these new entrants are taking their F1 ventures. The fact that Mick was in genuine contention until the end also suggests that his reputation within the paddock remains strong. Teams aren't just dismissing him outright. They're having serious conversations about his potential value. That's actually quite encouraging for his long-term prospects, whether in IndyCar or potentially back in F1 someday. Looking ahead to 2026, we'll have the fascinating opportunity to compare two very different approaches. Cadillac will field their experienced duo in brand new F1 machinery under revolutionary regulations, while Mick will be tackling the unique challenges of IndyCar racing, including those intimidating oval races that present their own set of risks and rewards. The timing couldn't be more perfect for this comparison because both series will be showcasing their respective strengths during the same period. F1 will be dealing with massive technical changes that could shuffle the competitive order, while IndyCar continues to provide some of the closest, most unpredictable racing in motorsport. What makes Mick's story so compelling is that it represents a different kind of courage. It takes guts to walk away from the F1 dream, even temporarily, and pursue success in a different arena. Many drivers get trapped in the cycle of waiting for F1 opportunities that never come, gradually losing their competitive edge and confidence in the process. By choosing IndyCar, Mick is betting on himself and his ability to succeed in one of the world's most competitive racing series. If he performs well, it could actually enhance his F1 prospects by demonstrating his versatility and race-winning capability. If he struggles, well, at least he'll know he gave it his best shot, rather than wondering what might have been. The story also highlights the evolving landscape of top-level motorsport. Drivers are increasingly willing to pursue excellence across multiple series, rather than focusing exclusively on F1. This trend benefits everyone because it raises the profile and competitive standards of series like IndyCar, while giving drivers more opportunities to showcase their talents. As we look toward 2026, Mick Schumacher's journey from F1 hopeful to IndyCar rookie represents more than just one driver's career pivot. It's a reflection of changing attitudes toward motorsport success, and the recognition that greatness can be achieved in multiple arenas. The question now is whether Mick can translate his F1 experience into IndyCar success, and potentially use that success to eventually return to Formula One as a more complete, confident, and accomplished driver. Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. His willingness to take this risk makes him infinitely more interesting to follow than if he had simply remained on the F1 sidelines hoping for another chance.